In this video, I'll give you my final picks for UFC Mexico City. We'll talk about DFS, strategy, how to build some lineups, and I have something for you later. Let's make some money this week. We'll start with value plays. These are plays at 8,000 and below. You're going to need some underdogs in your lineup to make everything work, even if they don't win. Last week, only one underdog won on the entire card. It was Ilia Topuria and new. But that doesn't mean he's the only underdog that showed up on the optimal lineup. Val Woodburn also showed up on the optimal lineup, which some of you would not stop whining about. He picked Val Woodburn. Oh no. Val Woodburn was this close to winning by knockout, and he showed up on the optimal lineup. What more do you want? But let's dig into this week's value plays. First, you have to look at Ronaldo Rodríguez, also Luis Rodríguez, depending on where you look. Not somebody I'm dying to have in my lineups, but somebody I want to talk about because he's getting a lot of steam, and now he's actually the favorite, but he's at underdog pricing, which is not something that's always worked out. Sometimes when the line has swung and we've gotten somebody at 8K and below on DraftKings, but they're minus 120, minus 130, it actually doesn't go the way you think all the time. So Luis Rodríguez is somebody who I think is going to win, but I think it's going to be by decision. I don't see him grappling a whole lot here. I think it's going to be on the back of his striking. And we know that from a DraftKings perspective, striking is not the most rewarding metric in the world. You're only getting 0.2 points per strike, 0.2 points for significant strike. So the easy way to do it is combine both of those numbers times 0.2. So let's say he throws and ends up landing a total of 150 strikes. That's a good number, but even then, that's only 30 DraftKings points. So if you get 30 points from his striking, which could still end up winning him this fight, you get 30 points from the decision. You're only at 60 points. Let's say you get another 10 points from control time, maybe a few extra strikes, maybe a takedown. There's a good chance Luis Rodríguez wins this fight and scores around 70 to 75 DraftKings points, and I don't think that's going to cut it for you this week. That's only going to work for you if a lot of these underdogs don't win, but up at elevation with a lot of lines that are really wide, a lot of young fighters on this card as well, I think crazy things can happen this week. So I'm not dying to have him here, but I did want to talk about him in this spot. If you want him in your player pool, I'm not mad at you, but he's not somebody that I'm dying to roster this week. Somebody I will be having a good amount of is Jesus Aguilar, however. Jesus Aguilar is a finisher through and through. 7 of his 9 wins as a professional have been inside the distance. Last time out, he picked up that crazy knockout over Shannon Ross in the first round. I don't think that happens here. That was a perfect overhand right that he landed, and that was against Shannon Ross, who has the chin of an avocado. Mateus Mendonça is going to be able to take a little bit more offense than that, so I don't see Jesus Aguilar knocking him out with one of the first punches he throws in the fight, but I do think that he can knock him out, but I think he's more live for a submission. Publicly, I'm noticing Mateus Mendonça get a little bit of love. I don't understand it. And I say that because Mateus Mendonça, I feel like dropping down to flyweight is almost like a desperation move after he felt what Javid Basharat was like. This dude was a bantamweight for a long time, comes into the UFC, fights Javid Basharat at bantamweight, doesn't have a whole lot of success, so let me drop down to flyweight. He gets annihilated by Nate Maness. He lands a total of 3 significant strikes, gets knocked out in the first round, and I feel like he's just in a state of confusion. We talk more about this in the predictions video from earlier in the week, so if you haven't watched it, go check it out. It'll be linked in the description and in a pinned comment. But I worry for him. I worry that mentally the 2 losses back to back, making it to the UFC, not being able to win at this level, feeling unbeatable, and then being very beatable is probably doing something to the young man's mentality. Meanwhile, Jesus Aguilar is riding a whole lot of momentum. He gets to fight in front of his people. I think he's going to do really well here, and I think he catches Mateus Mendonça in the 2nd or 3rd round. Meanwhile, Jesus Aguilar's coming in with a ton of momentum. He's fighting down in front of the Mexican people, and I think that he's going to snatch up that signature guillotine of his and get this guy out of there. Even if Mateus Mendonça is having success at range, we saw against Nate Maness, he had success at range, immediately closed distance. And I understand it's like a magnetic force in there. You can't help it sometimes. But if he starts trying to close the distance over Jesus Aguilar rather than using his long reach advantage, if he shoots for a takedown, his head is anywhere close to one hip or the other, he's getting choked out, and I think that's what happens here. So for the first official value play, I think at 7,800, Jesus Aguilar is a fine play and somebody that you should have in your player pool. Try to be overweight to the field if you can, because I think he puts up a lot of points. The next value play is going to be Cristian Quiñonez. The guy's got hands, man, and I think he's going to put hands all over Raoni Barcelos this week. We talked about it earlier in the week, but Raoni Barcelos is clearly starting to skid. He is old, he is losing a lot of these fights, and I think that Quiñonez is coming into his own even last time out. If you're just watching the box, and we'll talk about watching the box in just a minute, you might see the first round submission to Kyung Ho Kang and think, okay, he'd got the doors blown off of him. He only landed 13 strikes, lost in the first round. That's partially true. You also look at his price that night at 8,800. If you were somebody who rostered Quiñonez and he did that to you last time out, I know for a fact you don't want to touch him again. But that's where the opportunity comes from, because yes, he lost. Yes, it was early. Yes, he only landed 13 strikes, but he almost had Kyung Ho Kang out of there. He could come in with a good game plan. He should be better acclimated for the environment. And I think if he's throwing hard 1-2 down the middle, he's going to catch Raoni Barcelos at the end of these punches. We talk about the principle I'm about to discuss all the time on the channel. Some of you are new. I think there's been a couple hundred of you that have subscribed in the last 10 days or so welcome. But understand this. This is something that if you've watched the channel for a while, you understand. You don't always need to play the people you like and don't like. Last week, I liked Henry Cejudo to win, and after round 1, it was looking pretty good. But I said in these videos, I like Henry Cejudo to win. I can't play him on DraftKings because of his scoring ceiling. Not only that, but I said despite me thinking that Merab is going to lose, he's somebody you need to be playing on DraftKings, having some exposure to because of his scoring ceiling. Sure enough, he hits that ceiling. All I'm saying is don't be afraid to take some chances with your underdogs or with your lineups. It doesn't just need to be underdogs. You can come up here and play somebody like Yazmin Jauregui. I don't recommend it, but you could. You know, there's going to be somebody who's priced at 8,500 and above who nobody is getting to. Ziam's probably not going to pull much ownership. Yazmin Jauregui shouldn't pull much ownership, I'm telling you now. But without fail, the fighters that are going overlooked are the ones that show up on the optimal lineup. So just consider that as you're building lineups. We'll get back into the value plays. Brandon Royval is really interesting for your value plays this week. Obviously, you're going to want some of him in your player pool because of what he can do. Brandon Royval is one of those few fighters that's going to stay as dangerous in round 1 all the way through round 5. I think the elevation and the pace is going to get to him a little bit, so the likelihood of him finishing the fight might start to diminish a little bit, but he's so unpredictable and he's so opportunistic. Brandon Royval snatches things up in a flash, and I think that if Brandon Moreno's not minding his P's and Q's, he can get caught with something. I think it's pretty unlikely because even when Moreno has been caught with something, he gets out of it, he finds a way to gut it out, he stays patient, he stays calm, he's great with that. But it's MMA, it's a 5-round fight, anything can happen, and this is Brandon Royval, somebody who is always going to fight for your money. There's no shortage of effort when you're watching Brandon Royval compete. Most of his wins in the UFC are inside the distance, so he's somebody that you're going to want a piece of this week, of course. Now for this next value play, I talked about this earlier in the week, and throughout the week I've thought about it more and more, and I've gotten even more passionate about this angle. Let me open this up real quick. Let me open up Raul Rosas Jr. real quick. You want to talk about a grappling phenom. You want to talk about someone who's super young, super marketable, could end up being a superstar in another country, someone who might be the best grappler in their division and may end up even being the champion one day. I'm describing Tatsuro Taira. We don't have him this week. We have Raul Rosas Jr. Raul Rosas Jr. is 2-1 in the UFC with 2 very good performances and 1 awful performance. He beats Jay Perrin, who couldn't buy a win in UFC, Contender Series, Bellator, not good. He beats Terrence Mitchell, who I promise you is 0-2 in the UFC, will not win a UFC fight and will be cut before the end of the year. The one time he has competed against somebody who has won fights at the UFC level, not only did he lose, he landed 2 strikes for the entire fight. To go a step further, those 2 strikes came in the 3rd round, which means at least 10 minutes of fight time went by where he didn't land a single strike. He was fighting Cristian Rodríguez, and I love me some C-Rod. We picked him that night, and mind you, Raul Rosas Jr. was minus 250 that night, a big favorite like he is now. But to not land 2 strikes in over 10 minutes of fight time, you would have thought he was fighting Khamzat Chimaev. You would have thought he was fighting 2 men with that level of output. Not only are they 2 significant strikes, they're the only 2 strikes. And he got takedowns, but that doesn't really mean anything if you're not doing any damage and if you're not getting submissions. And here's the thing too with Ricky Turcios, who is the next value play, obviously. Ricky Turcios has won fights at the UFC level, has better cardio than Raul Rosas Jr. despite the age gap, and last time out put on a career best performance against Kevin Natividad. And here's the thing, if you are just watching the fight log, you are not going to get the whole story. You might watch the fight log and think the fight against Brady Heastand, he did better. He landed more strikes, he threw more strikes, he got a knockdown, he got 2 takedowns, he scored more DraftKings points. Great. But in the fight against Brady Heastand, he got taken down a lot, and when you watch that fight back, there were several moments where he just settled. Brady Heastand's in side control, Ricky Turcios is flat on his back, he's not getting his legs involved, and it just didn't look good. After a few seconds, he starts to work back to his feet and fights on, basically. But the Kevin Natividad fight is what stands out to me the most, and somebody in the comments earlier this week said something. I don't mean this as any disrespect, but they said, I didn't like how Ricky Turcios got taken down and controlled so easily by Kevin Natividad last time out. And that's what the numbers would suggest, because Kevin Natividad had, I think, 7 takedowns, 5 minutes of control time. If you go back and actually watch the fight, you can't look at a second and a half, 1.5 seconds where Ricky Turcios settles. It doesn't happen at any point. Not early, not late, not when Kevin Natividad is fresh, not when Kevin Natividad or Ricky Turcios is tired. Constantly moving. He gets taken down, no problem. He's going for a switch, the switch isn't there, no problem. He's elevating him with the butterfly guard. That doesn't work, no problem. He's diving under to a single leg of his own. If that doesn't work, no problem. He's going to work to his hip against the fence and get back up. If that doesn't work, no problem. I'll throw up a submission attempt. If that doesn't work, no problem. I'm striking the entire time. It's very El Cucuy-esque when he hits the mat. Now, the jiu-jitsu is not as snappy. The elbows aren't as sharp. There's no blades. There's no shades. But there's heart and there's effort. Another thing that stands out to me about the Kevin Natividad fight is if you look at specifically the third round, he eats, I counted, 4 knees. 3 of them were flying knees. 1 was a knee in the clinch. 4 knees flush to the gob. He eats a clean hook right behind the ear as well. I've seen this dude get smacked. Big shots that would sleep other guys, and he just keeps moving forward. Is he going to get taken down? Yes. Does he throw with much power? No. Is he all that accurate with the strikes that he's throwing? Not really. Should Raul Rosas Jr. be physically stronger than him? You betcha. But Ricky Turcios drowns guys with just his activity alone at elevation in front of this Mexican crowd. Raul Rosas Jr. thinks, I just knocked out Terrence Mitchell. I'm gonna go knock Ricky Turcios out. He hits Ricky Turcios with his best stuff. He gets takedowns, and Turcios is still there in the second round, moving around like Clay Guida. That's where the young man's gonna have some problems. That's where he's gonna get another learning experience like we saw against Cristian Rodríguez, because Ricky Turcios is gonna try to take him down as well. Mind you, I see plenty of people talking about Raul Rosas Jr. like he's this wrestler from Dagestan. Raul Rosas Jr. goes down easy. Cristian Rodríguez took him down like it was nothing. Ricky Turcios is going to be shooting for takedowns of his own. So don't be surprised if Pretty Ricky wins this fight. And when he's won in the UFC, he has scored 120 and 114. So do not sleep on the likelihood of him being one of the better value plays of the week. And we have one more value play to look into. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm. If you want to go a step further, share this with somebody you know who's going to be watching the fights next week. And if you don't know what to comment 2 underdogs that you think are going to win this week. If you're right, I'll shout you out in next week's video. We're not going to do it this time because nobody was right. Not your fault. Ilia Topuria was the only underdog that won, but if I start giving out participation trophies for picking one underdog, well, we have nothing. We have no order. The final value play that we're going to look at here is Sam Hughes, just because of the pace. Similar to the Ricky Turcios situation, when you look at her pace and you look at her price, she's someone you need to have in value play consideration. Yazmin Jauregui has no takedowns in the UFC, has no submissions on her record. I have seen, I went back and watched, she gets clinched very easily. Now, she does defend takedowns pretty well, but she was also defending takedowns against a woman who finished her career like 0-5 or something like that. When you look at Sam Hughes, she's fought 7 times in the UFC. She's been there, she's done that, and frankly, she's fought much better competition than not only Yazmin Jauregui has fought, but Yazmin Jauregui herself. Tisha Torres is better than her, Loma Lookboonmee is better than her, I would argue Piera Rodríguez is better than her. But when you look at how she's winning some of these fights, she drowns Amorim, she's getting choked out, fights out of it, ends up winning the fight. Amorim's got nothing left, and she ends up winning with 83 DraftKings points. Elise Reed just beats the brakes off of her with her takedowns, with her pace. Look at the control time. I mean, is this Khabib Nurmagomedov? No, it's Sam Page, and she's probably going to do the same thing this week. You look at the fight against Estela Nunes, she's getting lit up early. The same way Estela Nunes was giving it to Yazmin Jauregui early, but what happens? She weathers the storm, she gets back into it, she gets takedown, she gets control time, she lets it all hang out, she lands a lot of strikes, 92 DraftKings points, wins that fight. Look at the prices, 6,800, 6,900, you're in that 7K range here. Never has she been favored in the UFC. So when you look at the betting line, a lot of people will immediately think, oh, she's going to lose because she's a big underdog. Some people are always underdogs. Think about Michael Johnson, who's always favored. I think we broke down that in 9 of his last 11 losses, Michael Johnson was favored. Now Sam Hughes is the biggest underdog that she's been in her UFC career, the cheapest DraftKings price you're going to get her at, and she's fighting somebody who has not seen the level of competition that Hughes has. If Sam Hughes loses this fight and scores you 40 DraftKings points at 6,700, I'm more than fine with it. She's super tough. She's got the cardio edge. She's going to be the way more willing grappler here, and I think she's just going to put a pace on Yazmin Jauregui, especially after last time, seeing how Denise Gomes put her down so easily. I think that her approach is going to be a little different. I think Sam Hughes is going to come in with a better game plan, probably looking to land the same kind of strike that Denise Gomes landed. Down at her price, she checks a lot of boxes for you. Somebody I'm going to be playing on DraftKings myself, somebody who, especially for your cash games, is gold, absolute gold. But let's use these value plays to start building lineups. Before we do, if you are at all interested in getting an extra edge on your competition with a lineup optimizer, DFS strategy guide, data model, projections, you can go grab total access right on the Kunith MMA website. That'll be linked in the description and in a pinned comment. If you want just the lineup optimizer because you want to compete with the field at a higher level and you're somebody who makes more than 20 lineups a week, then you could just get the lineup optimizer. Again, that is included in the total access package. That gives you the official betting article as well, which we are looking to go for the third consecutive week of having a profitable week, and it's on the horizon. Come on, let's go. Again, links for everything will be below. Let's build some lineups. We'll start with your cash game lineups. The approach for cash games is pretty simple this week. I'm going to build the lineup as we talk through it. Again, I think that cash games, like we talk about all the time, are some of the most slept on ways to play this game. People just get way too greedy. They think that they need to constantly swing for the fence, play in the big contest. Most of the time, if you only have one lineup or something like that and you're playing in the big contest, it's not going to work. Getting your one bullet to get through in those kinds of contests, it's really just low percentage and not something that you really should be hanging your hat on. But this is an example of a cash game lineup that you can run this week. Brandon Moreno, Brandon Royval are an absolute no-brainer, and coupling Sam Hughes in there is a no-brainer as well, because you need your punt play and you need to stack the main event when it's like this. 5 rounds, flyweights, it's probably going to go the distance. So we have Manuel Torres, Felipe Dos Santos, Muhammad Naimov. This is where I think you should land this week, or something close to it. If you want to knock one of these guys out, plug somebody else in, I'm totally fine with that. But we have our guaranteed winner here. We have the perfect punt play because she checks off all 3 of the punt play boxes. You need to help us save some salary. She's the cheapest fighter on the slate. You need to be in a situation where you probably don't get finished right away, so you avoid like heavyweight punt plays and things like that. Sam Hughes typically not getting finished too early, and the last and most important piece is that you need to be able to win. There needs to be a path of victory here for you. She can win with her pace, her pressure, her wrestling. So that is your cash game lineup of the week. If you want the official cash game core, you want the DFS strategy guide, again, you can see that on kunithmma.com, but this should get you where you want to be, or just this general framework that's going to help you be more successful moving forward and this week when you're building your cash game lineups. Now for tournaments, we want to capture upside. So we're not looking to stack because we're going to have a loser. We want to get 6 winners as best as we can. So what are we going to do with the tournaments this week? Well, you could do anything. Edgar Cháirez is really interesting when it comes to your tournament plays because Daniel Lacerda has just been the gift that keeps on giving to his opponents in the UFC. We just look at his run. He lost in the first round, although it was a bad decision. Gets finished in the second round. Big day for CJ Vergara. First round knockout, first round submission, second round knockout. And there are plenty of people out there that think that this was a good decision against Cháirez. So you have 5 UFC fights, 5 losses inside the first or second round. Edgar Cháirez at 9,300 is somebody who, if he scores the same way that these other opponents of Lacerda's has, he's fine. Brandon Moreno with 5 rounds to work is somebody who can always score very well. Even last time out, he loses and scores 95 points. So let's say the judges scored that the other way. He scored 125 points and blew up the slate. Yair Rodríguez with 5 rounds to work is somebody who I really like for your tournaments this week at 8,500. The price is nice. The matchup is even better. I think that Yair Rodríguez could go nuclear here. 7,800 left over, so now we got to start pulling from the underdog pool. Let's keep the consistent salary of 7,800 by plugging in someone who's 7,800 in Jesus Aguilar. We have to fill these last 2 spots, so what I'd probably do here is get one of my cheap guys like Ricky Turcios. Now I have 8,400, and I can grab that first round upside from Manuel Torres. He has scored 105 and 114 in the UFC. This is a fine tournament play. You've got Cháirez, Brandon Moreno, Yair Rodríguez, Jesus Aguilar, Ricky Turcios, Manuel Torres. I don't think it's the chalkiest in the world because I think a lot of people are going to be on Raul Rosas Jr. Getting direct leverage on that by playing Ricky Turcios. I think a good amount of people are going to play Brandon Royval, so you're getting leverage there with Moreno. I think Moreno goes more owned, of course. He should be higher owned. The same thing with Yair Rodríguez over Brian Ortega, but these two are also going to pull ownership of their own, so you are getting some leverage by going the other way. I think Jesus Aguilar comes in lower owned than Mateus Mendonça, and overall I think this is a fine lineup with a lot of finishing upside. You have a finish there, 5 rounds, finish. You've got that pace who can win over 3 rounds and score you a lot of points. We've seen it already. And then that first round upside from Torres. This is cool. Let's build another one to give you an idea. Felipe Dos Santos is interesting. He scored 40 points last time out against Manel Kape. Through 100 strikes, almost all of them were considered significant. What's cool about that fight is that Manel Kape is somebody who's not going to be easily taken down. The guy is a tank for 125 pounds. On top of that, landing 100 significant strikes over 3 rounds in a short notice spot against somebody who's one of the biggest punchers in the division as well in Manel Kape means something. Not just for that performance, but for this performance as well, because when you look at the power difference side by side from somebody like Manel Kape to Victor Victor Altamirano. Manuel Kape's power is like moonshine. Victor Altamirano's power is like Sprite. So I think that Felipe Dos Santos isn't going to have to respect what's coming back his way, and he can let his hands go. He can also get takedowns here, so I think the finishing upside is there. Even if the finishing upside isn't there, he's going to land a lot of strikes. I think he gets a good amount of control time if he wants to lean on his grappling at all. And the path to 100 plus DraftKings points is there for him this week, so we'll plug him in this lineup. Ziam is somebody who's kind of interesting. He's never broken 100 DraftKings points, so not somebody I'm dying to play, but somebody who, if you have him in your lineups, you're definitely getting different. At the risk of being redundant, I do want to put at least either Brandon Moreno or Yair Rodríguez in there. You have 2 5-round fights. The chances of both of them not showing on the optimal lineup are slim to none. The number one thing you want to do in DraftKings MMA is do your best to get different, but there's a good balance between getting different and being illogical. Most of the time, somebody in the main event shows up on the optimal lineup. Now, if we have 2 5-round fights, think of that. The chance of that happening again are really, really high. If you only want to play one of these guys, that's cool with me. So let's plug in Yair Rodríguez at 8,500. Let's come down here and grab Sam Hughes. Let's grab Cristian Quiñonez, 9,300 left over. You can basically play anybody. If you didn't want to leave any salary on the table, Edgar Cháirez is your man. If you start looking at the rest, you see Muhammad Naimov. He's yet to break 100 DraftKings points. Doesn't mean that he won't, but he's yet to do that. If you want to grab somebody like Raul Rosas Jr., that's fine. He has scored a lot in his wins. Again, very passionate about the Ricky Turcios play. If he loses, he loses. You can't be right all the time, but if you want to play Raul Rosas Jr., that's fine. Daniel Zellhuber, not somebody I'm dying to play just because he has a very tough Francisco Prado in front of him, but I do think that he's going to be better everywhere. I think he's the better striker, the better wrestler, the better athlete. I think he's a lot longer. I think he's just better build for it, better frame for it, better mind for it, better training situation. So if you want to put him in there, that's cool, but if I'm in this situation, we come right back to Brandon Moreno, leave 500 salary on the table. Let's move on. Now, if you're in the Royval crowd this week, which I know a good amount of people are, 7,400, that opens up a lot. You can do a lot of things. So let's go double cheap. Let's even put Jesus Aguilar in there. Now we've got 9,066 left over per fighter. You can do pretty much whatever you want. I'm going to plug in Manuel Torres. I'm going to grab Yair Rodríguez. 10,400 left over. You could play anybody. Now, this is just an idea that we can kind of play with a little bit. If we start looking at this, is the bout order here. So you have Muhammad Naimov early. So he's somebody who can get you off to a hot start. If he goes out there, picks up a first round knockout, you're ahead of the field. It's green on your DK thing. You feel great about yourself. Then you're looking at this next fight, and it's Victor Altamirano, Felipe Dos Santos. You think, well, Felipe Dos Santos could hit that ceiling. The Bondar Rodríguez fight, I'm not too high on. I'd say the same thing for the Ziam and Puelles fight. So now we're here with Lacerda and Cháirez. One of them's probably going to show up on the optimal lineup. Let's go right there. We don't have much to work with now. Things are getting tight. Mateus Mendonça versus Jesus Aguilar. We like Jesus Aguilar, you know that. So 7,300 left over. We don't even need to look at the rest of the bout order because we know we kind of have to live down here, right? If we do look at the bout order, we know that we got Barcelos Quiñonez, which is a fight that could end up going the distance and being a lot of striking. We've got Manuel Torres there. We've got Hughes and Jauregui. So let's look at something real quick. If we plugged in Manuel Torres, nope, can't afford Sam Hughes. So let's take him out. Let's put Sam Hughes in there at 6,700 and see what we have left. So you got 7,900 left over. This is where we don't need to look at the bout order. This is where we start to lean on game theory a little bit. Like we said just a moment ago, with 2 5-round fights, you're going to want a winner. I don't think that Brian Ortega's in a great situation. If I were here, I'd probably click Brandon Royval, leave 500 salary on the table, call it a day. This is against the grain. But those are your tournament lineups for the week. Again, if you want the resources, you can visit the website, but I'll say this: don't be afraid to do something crazy in your lineups. Don't be afraid to leave salary on the table. Again, play the winners that you think will show up, or at least have allocation to the winners that you think will show up from the 5-round fights, and play your cash games. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I wanted to go over Underdog Fantasy. They'll give you a first deposit match up to $100. I will throw an Underdog Fantasy slip up on the community tab on YouTube, so make sure you check that out there. Also, follow me on Twitter for good luck. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers on Twitter, 10,000 on YouTube, but we're getting there. The trajectory is nice, but Twitter, it's a slow grind, at least for me, because I'm a grown man who doesn't have time to make memes all day. But if you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, and I wish you the best of luck.